Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Creative Careers, where we talk with folks from all over the place who are working in the arts in all different art disciplines and all different ways. And so today, I'd like to go ahead and welcome our guest for today's episode. Welcome, Christopher Gillard. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for
Abs-
having me.
Yeah. So let's start off with just simply go ahead and tell us, what do you do? What is your work in the arts?
I am a composer for film and theater and other media, basically. Um, so I write music for movies, for theatrical. I've written for musicals. I've written background, like kind of incidental music for theater productions. Um, and I've done a lot of sound recording also for film. So like actually standing on set with the boom pole and mixing all the audio afterwards. So like post audio for film I've done as well.
Nice. So tell us, how did you get here? When did you first start becoming interested in music and especially maybe composing? And what did you do to get to this point?
I started out, goodness, probably I guess seventh grade, and that was when I first started. I started out as a singer, as a vocalist. So that was when I really first started singing. I auditioned for, actually no, it was eighth grade because I was auditioning for the ninth grade choir in high school. And I got into that and just loved it. And, I really initially thought I was going to make my career as a performer, as a singer, as a lot of people start out. So after that, ended up going to college at Florida State, and I majored in basically in communications with a focus on media performance, and I minored in theater as well as music. Um, so that was, and again in college, my instrument was voice. So that was when I got really first exposure to theater, and you know, grew to love that like right away, as well as, in addition to music. Um, was always also again a big fan of movies as well, which is always, what led me to want to gravitating towards the entertainment industry. Um, Fast forward a few years, I graduate from college. I am in a band, and we ended up booking almost a 1 year, like 8, 9 month tour. So I spent my first year out of college, touring the southeastern U.S. with my band, which was enlightening in a lot of ways. Um, I found that I didn't really care for that lifestyle, honestly. Um, I loved the performing. I loved the job. I didn't like living out of a suitcase. I didn't like, a lot of that stuff. So I actually stepped away from music for several years and didn't do anything related to the arts, and was working, like type jobs. But during that time, I knew there was something I was going to return to, and I was sort of saving up, saving money, putting money aside, and I decided to enroll in a program called the Recording Connection, which is it's like a mentor, not a mentorship, but like a true like apprenticeship program where you go work. I went to a recording studio in Long Island, New York, and worked one on one with a working audio engineer who like taught me everything from the ground up. He's a great guy. He was, very successful. He has 5 Grammy awards. So yeah, I got to like, learn all his tips and tricks. So that, kind of brought me up to speed on on audio engineering in the digital age. Um, from that, basically, I started doing like music production work for other people. That led me to doing music production work for a friend who was also a filmmaker. And one day he said to me, "Do you think you could write some music for this short film I did?" And again, having always been a big fan of movies, I thought, yeah, I mean, I've never done it, but I'll give it a shot. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And so I ended up doing a lot more work with him. Um, I would say probably my first 4 or 5 films I did were with the same person. And then, he started telling, from those films getting around, people started, slowly, it took time, but, people started coming to me instead of me constantly chasing them all the time. Um, so I've done probably, goodness, I don't know, 15 or 20 short films now, and web series. I've not done a feature film yet. I'm still working my way up to that. I've done, like I said, written music for a number of theater productions. And I just finished, actually, my during the pandemic, I moved to Bulgaria, to Sofia, Bulgaria, and got my master's in my MFA in music for film and contemporary media. So I just finished that. So I'm just kind of like getting back into, I'm getting really kind of just getting, I haven't even been back from Bulgaria, but like 8 or 9 months. So um, that's kind of where I am now. I'm like taking everything I learned and like trying to incorporate it and improve my own uh, processes and business and everything.
Yeah, I love that. So I love that you've had kind of a connection to music in all different kinds of ways. I would love to hear, now that you're kind of on a film composing or theater composing track at this
Mm.
moment.
Sure. Yeah.
How does this what do you love about this in comparison to maybe the performing? You talked about the touring lifestyle not really being your thing, but what else do you really love about music composing that is different from performing?
It's different. It was the same enjoyment I got from songwriting, when I was in my band, but it's, I mean, to be honest, I like the fact that I didn't have to write lyrics. and but it was like that also made it challenging in another way, in that you had to express everything just through the music. You can't say verbally what the piece is about or what the emotion is. So you really have to learn how to speak through the instruments, and interpret and be able to like watch something on a screen and musically interpret those emotions. And that's a lot of what the training specific to film composing is about. Is, you know, like one of the first exercises we did in my grad program was we had to choose an emotion and write a piece of music to express it, and everybody had to guess what the emotion was. So it's exercises like that learning, really learning to play any instrument, but especially an orchestral instrument. Um, Trying out multiple instruments if you have the means to. Like, don't feel like you have to, because a lot of film composers, especially, like some of them really are like virtuoso musicians on a particular instrument, but a lot aren't. You know, a lot just kind of can know their way around a keyboard and maybe a couple of other instruments and do everything else on the computer. Um, so, you know, and that would be the third thing, is start to learn digital production, and that's probably the most accessible thing, because there are programs that are free. There's a program called Reaper, which is completely free. It works on PC or Mac, and it's basically a music production program. You can download it anytime and sort of, start getting your feet wet. Try making a song, you know, just for fun, and you will learn so much about the process. And like, as you go, if you really like it and continue with it, you'll learn the rest. But the earlier you can get the basics under your belt, the further you'll go.
I love that. So you mentioned some of the things that you had to kind of learn and work on. Maybe what was the most challenging thing that you had to learn to get your skills up to this level? And maybe it's one of the ones you already mentioned, or maybe it's something else. But what was a special challenge for you for working on
um
these skills?
for me, actually, coming from a more contemporary music background, like playing in a band with, like, a singer, a drummer, a guitar player, and a bassist, and writing for those kinds of contemporary, like modern pop, groups. From going from that to trying to write for orchestral instruments was a big adjustment for me. And early on, one of the things that I learned was, well, actually not too early on. It took me a while to figure it out. But when you are using a lot of orchestral instruments on the computer, can play much wider ranges than the real instrument can. So you have to know the range of the actual instrument because I did that a lot. And I was starting out. I was writing parts that couldn't be played on the real instrument. And yeah, the computer will let you make those sounds, but they don't really sound that great because that's not the real, and they don't sound that realistic because that's not the real range of the instrument. That's a computer's approximation of it. Um, so just learning, to write for orchestral instruments and learning, here's how you use, when you whatever you have the bass doing very frequently, it's easy to have, if you want to reinforce that, have the cello playing the same thing an octave above, things like that. Pairing the woodwind instruments, like, keeping the flute and the clarinet together and the oboe and the bassoon together. Stuff like that, you just don't know until you have to write for a real orchestra, that like you're going to go into a studio and record with real musicians, so it has to be playable. um, so yeah, that for me, that was a huge learning curve, because it was, I'd I'd sung a lot of classical music, I'd listened to a lot of classical music, but I'd never really written, for classical or orchestral instruments with any knowledge of what I was doing. um, and that's why I wasn't getting great results at first. um, so that's, yeah, like I said, that for me was the biggest challenge, by far, and I'm still working on it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I hadn't even thought about that, about the computer being able to play more than the instrument could, and
Yeah.
having to know where to limit yourself there.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
It's crazy. It's like one of those things that, until somebody points it out, you would, because somebody had to point, like physically tell me, like, or like literally tell me, like, like a real clarinet can't play that high, right? Oh, really? No, I didn't know that.
God. Yeah. So you mentioned the Reaper, the free audio production. If if a kid is watching this, if a student is watching this and thinks, I want to start playing around with this, and goes ahead and downloads that, where would you suggest they start with that? What should they start playing around with to
um,
start learning this?
there are basically, what Reaper will give you is, it's a software that will let you record both digital, instruments like synthesizers, or like digitally recreated uh, orchestral instruments, that type of thing. Or you can also, if you want to invest in it's a piece of equipment called an interface. That is what allows you to plug a microphone in and connect it to the computer. So Reaper is a program that will let you do those digital instruments as well as record in your own audio as well, if you want to. And it's what's called, we call it a DAW, a DAW, which is a digital audio workstation. Um, and that's just kind of like a general term for programs like that. Like Reaper is one. There's Logic Pro X. There's Pro Tools. There's Cubase. There's a number of different, like, it's kind of a personal preference thing, which route you go. But Reaper is a really good one that I recommend to people starting out, primarily because it's free. You can use it, for as long as you want. It's full. You have access to all the features. Um, there's also another program called Audacity, which is free, but I believe Audacity only lets you work with audio. But it's still, but again, it's free. So, and then once you have that, you can go in search of, there are tons of companies that just make what are called sample libraries. And they'll go out and sample, like, they'll get all the players from like the London Philharmonic, and they'll sit down the oboe player and have him play every sound that can be made with an oboe. And those are the kinds of libraries that, media composers use. You can find some really basic versions of those online for free. Spitfire Audio has a whole collection of sounds, or all kinds of cool orchestral sounds, some sort of like synthy sounds, some percussion stuff. Um, and you can download all that stuff for free. You download Reaper, you go download those sounds from Spitfire, and just start playing around. Just play around. And, you know, if you find yourself interested in it, I would say your next stop is, to be honest, YouTube. There are so many YouTube channels devoted. There are well, no matter which program you decide to use, whether it's Cubase, Reaper, Logic, whatever, there are multiple entire YouTube channels devoted only to that platform, where you can go and learn any and everything you want to know about that software and how to do whatever it is you're trying to get done. Um, So it's, it's it's one of those things where very much where if you want the information, it's out there. It's really easy to get. You just have to want to go get it, you know.
Yeah, that's super cool. Thank you for all those suggestions and all those resources. And
Sure.
thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your journey with us. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure there are going to be some students out there who are interested in this for
No
sure.
problem. Thank you.
All right, folks, thank you so much for watching. And don't forget to come back on the second Tuesday of next month at 3:30 for our next Let's Be Creative episode. Thanks. We'll see you then.